Hi everyone, welcome to the ESFP live Q&A, and I'm here with Brady. And so Brady, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Hi, everyone. Hi, chat. I'm Brady. I'm an ESFP, and Joyce found me because I really like to lurk in the comment sections. And, being the extrovert that I am, I said quite a bit. So anyways, yeah, I'm happy to be here. And yeah, that's about all I can think of at the moment. I'm sure there'll be tons of questions later.
It's great to have you on. And so Brady, I'm wondering, how is dominant SE like as an ESFP?
Well, there's good and bad, obviously. So for the positives, SE is a gathering function. So I'm very much living in the moment. I'm collecting experiences, collecting information, doing things as I feel like doing them. And that's basically what SE feels like. Hi, self. That's what it feels like for me, anyways. And I think probably from the point of view of others, might appear to be impulsive, might appear to be fun. Just depends on how you feel around SE when it's in a dominant position. But negatively, if SE doesn't have anything to do, SE will find something to do. So if I'm not honing it for good, I tend to use it for overindulgence.
Really, really interesting. Yeah. One of the words used for SE is experiencing. So
Mm-hmm.
the gathering of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And so what is your experience of the auxiliary supporting role, FI and ESFPs?
Right. And so this is where it's different than, let's say, an ESTP, although we both have SC as our dominant. For me, oh, hi, Diego. So for me, as with FI and the auxiliary, it means that when I'm experiencing things in the moment, it's based on what I value and what I like. So I'm searching for things that will feed that, will kind of feed the idea of meaning and purpose and what I enjoy doing, what feels good in the moment, rather than necessarily what will be most beneficial for me logically. So that's good and bad. Again, there's positives and negatives to that. Because, yeah, I get to enjoy life quite a bit, but then when I don't really think about things logically and I'm just based on feelings, obviously there's consequences there. Because I might forget to do important things like, 2 days before taxes are due, I might be like, oh crap, I forgot to do that. And then that might be more of an NI thing, but I would say also FI, it's not something I prioritize. So I get around to it eventually, but that can be a bit of what FI is like. It's a little bit more, I wouldn't say selfish necessarily, but it can be definitely a little bit less like what the world think you should do.
Yeah. FI is all about value congruence.
Mm-hmm.
And so living in a way that's congruent with how you feel and your values. And there's a large component to following your heart, like what Brady was talking about. Cool. And so what is your experience with the relief function of the ESFP, the
Yeah.
extroverted thinking?
Right. So having TE as my tertiary or child function, I actually think that makes the TEs or the ESFPs stand out as entertainers in a lot of way, because it's we're going out there, we want to make sure things happen, so we're looking for efficiency and action, of course. That's part of it as well, but from the entertaining point of view, it's like we want to make sure things are done, that they're done quickly, that so there's not much rumination, we just act in the moment as we see it. So that SETE combination kind of creates an activity monster in us. So yeah, no, I find that it is a relief function. A lot of my hobbies have to do with getting things done, having multiple projects at once, never being bored, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, especially with extroverted sensing, it's like very immediate thought to action. You have a thought and you're like, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that, again, positives and negatives, it's fun to be that way at times, but it can be super frustrating because, when you're around people who don't act that way, it can be really, really difficult, because I'm like itching to go, and someone's plodding along and it kind of kills me inside. But I also know not to pressure people because that's not good either.
Yeah, and so there can be an impatience element to extroverted sensing.
Hmm.
Cool. And so, Brady, what is your experience with your aspirational function, introverted intuition?
I use it poorly. I'm trying, but yeah, it's not my best. You know, I like to find meaning in things. I like to try to understand what makes the most sense. Um, I'm definitely trying to narrow things down, just like NI would suggest. You know, I try to funnel all the experiences I'm doing. I try to want to funnel it down into singular ideas. The problem with that, though, is I'm inundating it with experiences and data. So my NI often gets overwhelmed, and when that happens, I sometimes just ignore it. So that often ends up being what happens with NI is it gets kind of shoved aside for the things I'd rather be doing.
Yeah. And when you have introverted intuition lower, there's going to be a little bit of a trial and error way to living because you're like, I got to experience this to know the
Right.
patterns.
Exactly. Hmm.
Cool. And so Naisu says, greetings, Brady. If you can still remember, how was your experience getting typed? What about discovering your type as an SE dom made sense to you?
Well, I remember being in school, back middle school, high school, and I remember some of my test results. I remember I always got the extroverted sensing and feeling, but I don't remember if I was like J or P back then, but I'm going to assume it was probably P. But then recently, when COVID started, I started getting into personality type. So I can remember quite a bit because that wasn't too long ago. And I got hit really hard by the isolation element of COVID. And I was like, why am I getting hit so much harder with this than other people I know? Like, why is it so difficult for me to be trapped at home? And why do I view it as being trapped at home? Whereas other people might view it as like, oh, this is so great. Now I don't have to be around people, or oh, this is so great. Like I can finally get things I want to get done, accomplished. That wasn't my case. So I initially typed as an ISFP, and I think that's mainly because I was kind of in a darker place. I was a little bit less optimistic, a little bit more negative. And so, when you use your second and fourth functions more, it's a little bit more of a negative attitude. So I didn't type horribly wrong. Um, but the light bulb really went off when I watched a Michael Pierce video, his ESFP video. Someone recommended it to me, and it was just like light bulb, light bulb, light bulb, light bulb all over the place. It's like, okay, this is my type. And the more I watched and the more I saw, like watching Mariana on your videos, she reminds me a lot of myself. So yeah.
Yay.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's the idea of gathering and experiencing that to answer the second part of your question. That's definitely what made the most sense to me, is that's kind of my primary mode in life.
Mm. That sounds like a fun life.
It
Does
can
the
be.
does the gathering ever cause an impulsivity?
Oh yeah. So like, if let's say that you're at a party and there's the food table that's there and you see all the different food options, my NI knows, dude, chill. You don't need to eat all of that. But my SE wants all of it. So, I think that's like a really basic kind of elementary example of it, but it's a pretty relevant one.
Yeah. Pizza at 1 a.m. maybe.
Right.
Those
Exactly. That
little
kind of thing
decisions.
for sure is where SE impulsivity can really get in the way. And NI is kind of, like that meme of the kid who's drowning and is going to put their arm up, and like the mom is with the other kid. My NI is like that kid who's drowning putting their arm up, like that's very much what it's like.
That's hilarious. And so Ron asks, how have you improved your inferior NI?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maturity and aging has a lot to do with that. When I was younger, I had absolutely zero interest in knowing what my future was, and I just kind of did whatever people said I should do because I just literally had no sense or care about something that wasn't the present moment. So, like, I remember in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just like, I'll just have fun and, goof around with my friends and play basketball. I took like 3 PE classes at once because it was fun. Um, and eventually I had to make up my mind. And so since my whole family were teachers, I just became a teacher, even though I didn't want to be. And obviously that didn't work out because it wasn't really something I wanted, but I also couldn't afford to not have a job. So I think where it's improved is I integrate it more with my FI. It's more like what matters to me, what's important to me, what do I value in life, and keeping that in mind whenever I use my SE, whenever I go and do things, whenever I'm observing the world. It's like what matters to me and how can I make sure that happens for me.
Mm.
So I think from a general point of view, that's how NI inferior works for me. But daily, I just have like these little bullet points I put down so I don't forget to do them. I don't know if that's TE or NI, but maybe a little both.
Mhm. Yeah, your 3-item to-do list,
Yeah,
which is
exactly. It's just something just to remind myself not to screw up today. Like here are the things so you don't screw up today.
yeah, yeah, so one of the things that have helped is discipline, like finding a discipline
Mhm.
fit for you. Gosh.
Right. And I'm not great at it. I bet most ESFPs would agree that they're not great at that. It's not natural. But you also don't want your SE experiences to not be pleasant. Like you want to have a good life and a fun life. And so you do have to kind of become more responsible and more thoughtful about your actions.
Mhm, yeah, yeah. Sometimes, with dominant SE users, not all of them, a way that inferior NI manifests is risk-taking, actually, like, taking risks and not really realizing how big the consequences are until a lot later. Yeah,
Yeah.
so one of the ways to kind of, I guess, maybe improve inferior NI is therapy. With any inferior function, you can improve it through therapy.
Yeah. Well, I actually started seeing a therapist after we had our first child. It's like 2 years in, and I just realized like I am not doing so great. I really loved my kid and I loved my wife, and like that wasn't the issue. It was just more like, what the heck am I even doing? I was living so much in the moment that I had zero direction. It was just like trying to survive constantly or trying to make sure I didn't screw up parenting constantly. So I kind of lost my sense of direction and identity through that. And it really helped. Having a therapist made a really big difference as far as that's concerned. Absolutely.
Mhm, that's excellent. And so the next question is, how has learning about typology and typology
Oh,
terms and concepts benefited you personally?
so much, so much. It gave me language for things I couldn't explain to people. Um, so when COVID was happening earlier on, the early stages where it was kind of scary. You didn't know what you were allowed to do, not allowed to do, and we were just kind of stuck at home. I couldn't put words to why that was so hard for me. The thought of being physically trapped in the house, and as I got more information about extroverted sensing, I was like, well, it's because I'm not getting to see the world. I'm not getting to, I'm seeing the same things every day with no variation. And um, learning about typology made me realize that that was okay that I was feeling that way. It gave me a little bit of grace that way for myself. Like, yeah, of course you're feeling this way, man. Like you're stuck at home. You like to go and adventure. I'm one of the weirdos who likes traffic because I can sing in the car. Like it's and I didn't get to do any of that kind of stuff. It's just like work, pick up kids, you know, playing with the kids was like my one relief, those few hours. That was my one bit of variation every day. And then go to sleep, repeat. And that was it. Like nothing to take my mind off of it.
Mhm, yeah, that need for sensory variation. What are some weird ways you get your variation needs met? Because there are the common colloquial ways, you
Mm-hmm.
know, SE is often reduced down to sports, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not all that, like, that's a very small portion of it.
Yeah, it is.
It's really just, like, this sense of really experiencing the world, but I'm wondering, what are some interesting ways you experience the world, Brady?
Yeah. So, I a comparison I like to make is with Annie because my wife's an ENFP and I'm an ESFP, and our poor children have to deal with that. But so for me, it's like a big difference that I have as far as exploration compared to what she has with exploration is just the thought and ideas of doing things satisfies her any. It's the brainstorming. It's the this is what could be. We could go to this place. We go to that place. We go to this place. And I'm like, yeah, but which one are we doing? And are we actually going to do it? Because I'm dying over here. So like it's like actually seeing those places and actually physically putting your toes in the sand. Um, you know, like jumping into the waves, that rush of the waves hitting you. It's not enough for me to see the picture of it.
Yeah,
Like it's the beauty of the picture means nothing to me in comparison to the beauty of actually seeing the waves, hearing the sounds, the sand on the toes, and then actually physically interacting with that. Like I would say that's the observation of that. So the SE gathering of it, I guess.
absolutely.
It really feeds my soul in that way. So otherwise, it's just concepts, and I'm not actually doing it. So it's not that valuable to me until I do it.
Yeah, it's climbing that boulder, going to that farm, going to the ocean, actually experiencing it in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's why with the SPs, you'll see that they the most want to meet people in real life. So it's like, the Zoom is great and stuff, but there's
Mm-hmm.
more information you get when you're actually in person and you can see all of those bodily cues or all of the details that you missed because of the Zoom.
Oh, absolutely. Like I feel like, part of one of the benefits of an SE Dom or SE auxiliary person, like one of your strengths is your ability to kind of scan and see things around you and interact with it. And that's a lot of times how you can relate with people, how you can relate with your environment. When all you have is this little tiny square, right here in front of you, you see some of it, but you don't really get the full experience of it.
Mm, yeah. There's a quality of immersion to it. So when you're actually in the moment, it's almost like you're merging with the moment.
Well, and that's why, and I can't speak for all ESFPs here, but I personally enjoy video games and TV shows more than more than books. A lot of times because I'm actually not so much the TV shows. I would say video games because I'm actually moving the characters around. If there's a story being told, actually being able to move them around makes me feel like I'm part of it. It is that immersion. So I really like open world games or anything where my character's kind of dictating the story, because I feel like I'm there, in the best way you possibly could, because obviously it's just a video game. But
Yeah. A good word for SE is presence, being in the present, presencing it all. And so Crisis Alert asks, what have you been censoring? Censors, uncensored.
Nice. So for those who don't know, my username on here is Censors Uncensored. Just a little play on words, and I'm actually rarely censoring anything. Like I'll watch my language. Like I'm not going to be swearing a lot on here or something because I don't know who that would offend. So that is what I censor. Like I think about the individuals and like what might matter to them, and so I censor myself in that way. But I rarely censor who I am. I try not to, anyways. I always try to be myself, no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah. ESFPs tend to not have many filters.
Mm-mm.
They kind of say things. That's why there's a little bit of foot and mouth.
Oh God, yeah, so much of that. But it's like we kind of brush it off quickly too. Like it's if I have a foot and mouth moment, I can easily just shrug it off and be like, it's fine. If they think less of me because of that one little foot and mouth moment, that's on them.
You have confidence. Wow. That
Well,
resilience.
that's developed over time, of course, because I would say that in middle school that probably wasn't true. But
Mm.
no, as I've gotten older, it's true, because I'm like, that's, everyone's got their own baggage and stuff that they're dealing with, and I can't be in charge of everyone's emotions. So
That's a good way of looking at it.
mhm.
And so, do you read books or do you learn in general what is something you would want to master, like some kind of knowledge?
Yeah, I like that question. So um, I do read books sometimes, but the problem is in this stage of my life, the last 10 years, my job is I read medical records all day. So and I write. So it's just because I do disability decisions and stuff. So anyways, because I'm reading and writing pretty dry information all day long, I don't have a whole lot of energy for that kind of activity later on, which is kind of a downside to the last 10 years. But I watch a ton of informational things. I'm constantly consuming things I'm interested in. So whatever I'm passionate about at the moment, I will watch YouTube videos on that subject for hours, especially while I'm working. Um, So like I've watched a lot of Joyce's videos. Objective personality, I've probably gone through their whole video list twice, 3 times maybe. Same with Michael Pierce. You know, it's just something that I do really like getting knowledge. But to answer that other part of the question, I prefer to get lots of general information rather than really trying to master something. Like I rarely get to a point where I master it, because by then I'm usually kind of done with it. Because the further you go down in mastery, the more repetition you're getting. You know, you have to really sift out old information that keeps coming in as you're trying to find new information. It's kind of like, you know, what's an analogy there? Like if you're sifting for gold, you know, at some point the gold flakes run out and I get bored trying to find more gold. So, yeah.
Yeah. EPs, they get bored of things once there's you've learned enough about something, and then there's a diminishing return to the things that you'll learn after, because it's
Yeah.
fairly incremental.
Right. And so even though I love the idea of being able to master something, I think realistically, I know that I'm rarely going to hit that point. And when I do, I need to be doing something with it. So like with Typology, what's been great is I've actually been able to do something with it. You know, being part of your channel, having discussions with people, you know, having a side project that I'm working on. It all gives me some kind of activity to do something with the general knowledge. And holy crap, I just went on a huge tangent from the question. But yeah.
Yeah. I notice with tangents, you know, it's a word that's associated with extroverted intuition, but
Mm-hmm.
both NPs and SPs will end their sentences going like, "Oh, I went on a tangent." That's
Mm-hmm.
because of the extroverted perceiving. It's the SE and NE likes to gather, and so when you prefer gathering, you like to deviate to gather more.
Right.
And so it's kind of like a P thing sometimes
Yeah.
in general.
And we also start talking before we formulated our opinion or thought on it. You know, that's something I know Kristen said on one of your videos. Like she just kind of starts talking, then realizes, you know, like I don't actually know what I was going to say or how I was going to finish it.
That's fascinating. So cool. Yeah. And you also apply type by writing a book together. So
Yes.
yeah, me and Brady are going to be releasing a book on a new way to kind of see type. It's like kind of remixing the ways that people currently see it into like centralizing the useful concepts of type into kind of a one book format.
Right. And I didn't realize you were going to share that. So that was something I was going to say about my website, is that's pretty much on hold while we do that.
Yeah.
And then I'll plagiarize all your work and put it into my website. But no. But yeah, no, we're doing that. It's exciting. I'm really looking forward to it.
Cool. Yeah. And so what genres and songs are you into? Play music? Question mark?
Yeah. Okay. I wish I was musically inclined. So I played the piano when I was in elementary school. And at that time, I was so obsessed with basketball and soccer. That's all I wanted to do. So piano to me was this annoying thing that my parents made me do. And I was naturally subpar at it. You know, like I wasn't terrible at it. I just never wanted to practice it because I just wanted to be playing basketball. You know, I didn't want to be sitting and having to be forced to do it. But I have such an appreciation for music. I love music, and I have musicians in my family, you know, and you know, so I have great respect for it. As far as genres, man, that spans a very, very large amount of genres. But I would say probably what I listen to the most is like indie music, sometimes some alternative. And sorry, my floofy cat just came up to get pets. And then things like synthwave and EDM, drums and bass. Kind of depends what mood I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm wondering, how about your humor? What style of humor do you have typically?
British, very self-deprecating, putting people on the spot, which I'm so sorry to all the introverts out there that I've done that to. I try to be sensitive to it, but I love saying things that I know will make someone have to kind of banter with me, you know. But I typically like to be the one who says like the dry, witty thing after someone else said something. I also do a lot of slapstick kind of physical comedy. So like with my kids, I love losing in the games that we play and falling over and, like, just that kind of like very self-deprecating kind of humor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You also kind of like to stress people out. So like
Mhm.
before we joined, Brady was like, "Oh, by the way, I didn't charge my items for this interview." And he's
I
like,
said, I think I charged my items is what I said. Yeah.
yeah, you kind of like to cause adrenaline in people. It's like,
Hmm.
all right, I kind of want to put you on the edge.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. We were talking about it on a separate call. It's kind of that play energy. Like I like to. I heard someone say that kind of like what SPs do, especially ESFPs, is they like, and SE just in general likes to challenge ideas. It's like, does that idea work? Let's find out. And
Mm,
so I think that's what a lot of my sense of humor is just pointing out the things that maybe um, like things I find to be ridiculous, and just kind of pointing them out in a way that kind of forces them to actually have to use that thing that's ridiculous.
mm-hmm. Yeah. It's fascinating because SE it sees things with a brand new pair of eyes because you're gathering things. You're kind of
Mhm.
like, I'll see it for myself. I'll try it for myself. I'll be the
Yeah,
instrument which figures out if this works
right.
or
Oh,
not.
absolutely. And that's something that I know for a lot of people, as long as they get it in small doses, they don't mind it. It's kind of fun. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to temper that. Like I used to drive my ISFJ mom crazy because I love challenging SIFE things. You know, Whether it's FESI or SIFE, it doesn't matter. I just love challenging it. And so my poor ISFJ mom, like she would have this, this party over and she wanted things to be just so. And she'd ask me to set the table and I'd intentionally put silverware on the wrong side of the plate, things like that, because it's like, what's the point of this? Who cares? But as an adult, I'm like, yeah, that was kind of mean, like I wouldn't do that now.
Yeah, that's how you know someone as higher up SE or higher up NE, the amount of chaos they like to deliberately bring to situations to
Mm-hmm.
mix up the pot, to make things a little more interesting.
Right.
And so, as someone with high FI, how was personhood evolution throughout the years for you?
Yeah. Um, well, something that's always been important to me is being authentically who I am. Always, I like to. That last story goes against what I'm just about to say, but I really like to be kind to people, knowing that each individual has their own things that matter to them, that's important to them. Um, so I really, rather than seeing humanity as a whole, I tend to see individuals for being individuals, and that's something that's always been true for me. That has not evolved ever since I
Mhm.
was a little kid. My parents always said I never knew a stranger, so I could talk to anyone because I'm looking at a person who's them own that who is their own selves. They're not they're not a certain religion. They're not a certain, like, whatever label or grouping you want to put on someone. They are that person. And so that's something that's always been super consistent with me. But as far as evolution, it's more of like, what's my role? What do I value about who I am? Uh,
Mhm.
when I was younger, that was more like I really valued SE. It was like sports and food and playing and, having toys, those kind of things. I always needed something to do. As I've gotten older, it's more like I really value having people around me that I can laugh with and joke with.
Mm.
So it doesn't have to be so SE anymore. It doesn't have to be so literally physical environment. It can, now it's a bigger range of things that I value.
Mm. That's really great. Yeah, you mentioned the element of seeing individuals as individuals, which is a component of introverted feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It appreciates its own authenticity, so it cares about your authenticity too, and
Right.
preserving you as your own person, you as your own emotional experience,
Right.
and kind of respecting that you are your own unique fingerprint, that there is no one like you, and it's kind of like how you want to be seen you want to respect that about someone else too.
Mhm.
You want your significance to kind of be acknowledged in that way. So maybe someone else's identity and significance is also seen as unique and as that person.
Right. And that's like whenever I meet someone, I really don't like doing small talk because that doesn't tell me anything about who they are. Like I usually like to break the ice with them by bantering or something. I kind of get an idea of what they're like. So, yeah.
That's so amazing. And so what YouTube rabbit holes have you been into recently? For example, I binged a bunch of walking around the city videos this past year.
Oh my gosh, I love this question. So I love YouTube rabbit holes. They're amazing. So recently I've been trying to get into as many different personality typing systems as possible, whether I believe in them or not. And so this is an important disclaimer that I'm saying here, is that this is not because I believe in this or don't believe in it. It's just a generalized statement. Anyways, and I disclaimer out of the way. I've been watching astrology videos just to get an idea of what it is, because I've heard people talk about it. I'm like, what is this? So, doing a little bit of rabbit holes like that. I've been doing a lot of Michael Pierce videos again, just because I love his videos so much. I'm always doing Joyce Mang YouTube channel rabbit holes. Let's see.
How about
a few others.
Yeah, how about other channels too outside of type? So I don't know, lo-fi music or cooking channels or
Yeah. So I have Spotify, so I do that for music. So like I'll have rabbit holes where I just listen to one person's entire collection, but then I have some where I just go like synthwave radio play, see what happens. So it really just kind of depends on my mood. And lately I've been more of like a learning about things that I am not familiar with mode. So sometimes it's like I want to learn about atheism. Maybe I want to learn about the Romans. Maybe I want to learn about, like I said, astrology, something like that. Like I said, whether I believe in it or not isn't important. I just want to learn as much as I can about everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Memo asks, how did you discover typology? You talked about it a little earlier too.
Mm-hmm. So it was actually, and I don't know why it popped up, but there was a Frank James video that popped up on my feed, and it mentioned the 16 types. So I took the test and got ISFP. And I just kind of rolled with that for a bit. But that test so heavily favors introversion that, it was probably a big reason why I thought I was an introvert, because they made it seem like if you're an extrovert, you never need alone time ever and you always want to party. And that is so inaccurate to what an extrovert actually experiences. But yeah, that's how I started.
Interesting. Yeah. The 16 personality test, it favors introversion and intuitives.
Right.
So it's likely to type people in that sphere.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and when I learned that, I was like, I must be a censor if I typed a censor on the 16 personalities test. So, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the tests do get people sometimes close to their type or almost directly at their type.
Yeah.
So it's all about collecting multiple data points. So you don't have to throw away something just because it gets some people wrong. You can just take it with a little grain of salt. So it's like, So yeah, a lot of sometimes I see people throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And so like I guess what I'm trying to say is like tests, they're a good place to start, but they're not a good place to end. And that's for everything you go through life in anything. So it's all just a beginning point in the wonderful process of self-discovery.
Yeah.
And so the next question is, how sentimental are you? Do you have personal attachment to sensory experiences?
I also really like that question, Katie. So, typically sentimentality gets attributed to SI, but the thing is that in a lot of ways that's not really accurate, because SI is observational, whereas your feeling function is how you value something. So I've always thought that was something in MBTI. I think that's kind of been a mistake that people have made, is attributing that specifically to SI, because I am a little bit sentimental. I definitely have things that I attach to. Like I have a stuffed animal that was mine as a kid. I named him Magic Monkey because I was a big Magic Johnson fan. And I took that thing everywhere. And right now, my daughter has him in her bed, and it makes me happy every time I see it. Like almost teary-eyed happy, because it's just like that is a representation of my childhood. But it's more of like I remember all the things I did with him. I remember all the places I went with that stuffed animal. So the sentiment is more like it's attached to the joy I had with it rather than the actual physical object mattering to me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like I don't think the actual physical object matters so much as the experiences that are associated with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've had some STJs tell me that they don't feel sentimental with SI. So I think sometimes sentiment is also related to a feeling function at work.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's FI or FE, there's a element of sentimentality or emotionality to it, which
Right.
can look like SI, maybe a question mark.
Yeah, I know. And that was something, there's a lot of functions I think that people forget, like S and N, sensory and intuition are purely those things. Like if you start attaching judgment to those things, you're talking about a different function. Like if you're attaching judgment to S, to sensory, that's now you're like, okay, this is actually more of a feeling function rather than a sensory function at this point, or you get what I mean.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And so when you discovered SE as a concept that exists within you and you like to indulge in, were you surprised that it's something that other people don't have?
Yes, absolutely. As time goes on, because I just turned 40 this year, and it's something that as I've gotten older, I've realized more and more just how different everyone is. And I think, God, I sounded like an old man there. But yeah, everyone's so different, and it's so I wasn't surprised that people would be different than me, but I've been super surprised to hear people say that they just feel like, you know, a floating brain, or like a brain in a jar. That just absolutely shocks me whenever I hear someone speak about their experience that way. I feel every single thing on my body always, like whenever I'm anywhere, I feel all the sensations constantly, and it can actually be overwhelming. So when I hear people talk about it like they don't, or they don't value that, it just really surprises me. Yeah.
Yeah, and you notice when people have a lack of attention to detail, like when they wear their socks over their pants.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, or they try to put together colors that clearly don't work together.
Mm-hmm.
It's like surprising. It's like, oh, my SE notices that looks
Yeah.
horrible.
Well, like my daughter's an ENTP, and she will leave things like in places where they're going to get broken or stepped on. Like she'll just leave the Nintendo Switch on the middle of the floor, and I'm like, "What are you doing? Somebody is going to step on that," But it's just like she just doesn't think that way, you know. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that some people would look and be like, how are you not planning for things? How can you just jump in feet first into everything without thinking about the consequences? So I see how it works for all different sides.
Yeah. Sometimes as a SE dom too, like maybe there's something you're really excited about doing in the moment, and then
Mhm.
everyone else takes a while to like warm up and to do it.
That is my life. I mean, ENFP wife, ENTP daughter, ESTJ son. So it's like, um, I am like typically jumping into things before everyone else, where they kind of dilly dally a little bit more. My son, not so much. He's more likely to jump into things, but yeah. Oh my gosh, it can be stressful for me.
Yeah. Is there ever like a time where you're like, I feel like going to Target. I just feel like it. And then you
Yeah.
kind of ask people, hey, do you want to go to Target? And it takes them a while to kind of like warm up.
Yes. And I mean, to the point where I often won't suggest something that I mean, this sounds way worse than it actually is. I often won't suggest something that I really care about if I'm worried about what their answer is going to be. So if I really want to do something and I'm worried that they're going to say no, I rarely ask. That's something it's like, I don't want people to feel guilty for not wanting to do something I want to do. So if it like hurts for me to think they wouldn't want to do it, I'll just do it on my own later. That's how I've learned to temper my SEFI a little bit.
Well, you're so considerate. And so Rainy Day Commenter asks, primary struggles of SE Dom and any Dom relationship?
Trying to figure out long-term versus short-term can be a challenge. So one thing I'll start with a positive because I think it kind of relates to the negative. But the positive of SE NE is that NE loves to give ideas and SE likes to do them. So in that case, if she's leading the ship as far as like what, bringing forth ideas, and I'm like, yeah, let's do that one, that works great. The problem is when it's the other way around and I'm the one bringing forth. So this is the struggle usually, is when I'm bringing up an idea, I usually only have like one idea, maybe two. And if she doesn't want to do those or start to present like 18 different alternatives, that's a struggle for me. Because I'm like, my NI does not like that. My poor little insecure NI, does not like the thought of all those different ideas being put in place of the idea that it had. So that can be a problem. And I'm also not someone who's going to be very insistent on getting my way. So, oftentimes we can run into roadblocks because of that.
Yeah, it's the SE Doms, like there's so much inaction.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes any Doms don't realize when there's inaction because it's like their natural state. So they're like, oh, this is just the normal.
Right. Well, and, in fairness to any Doms, just talking about it can often fulfill the desire of the NE. It's just like, oh, here's an idea, fulfilled. For me, it's like, if there's an idea, my SE wants to actually do the thing in order to be fulfilled. So that can be a bit of a struggle for sure. But, we both have the same middle functions and some of the same just general values and outlooks on life. So even though we have some different approaches or ways that we observe the world, ultimately we're able to come to some consensus. It just can be awkward getting there.
Yeah. So Brady's wife is an ENFP.
And oh my gosh, is she ever. Like,
yeah.
She's also has ADHD. And so sometimes it's like, is it ADHD or is it ENFP or is it just both? And it's an unfair stereotype that ENFPs get, but she just happens to, fall into that category of ENFP.
How much would you attribute to type for compatibility?
Not much, honestly. I think type, it's less about compatibility and more about how you communicate. Because, I could be, if you take whatever pairing system you want to use, for an ESFP, it's either going to be an INTJ if you're using socionics, or if you're using some other system, it might be an ISFJ. That ISFJ or INTJ may think I'm annoying as hell because I always want to be doing things. And I might get frustrated about how slow they are. Or they may be like super dogmatic, in their life. And that would never vibe with me. So no, I think that there's too many other variables other than type that can stop compatibility from happening that has nothing to do with type.
I think the largest component to compatibility is non-type related. So sharing values, sharing interests, being good at conversation together, which doesn't always have to do with type.
Right.
And those are the most important.
Yeah, because people might say, well, FI should have FE to balance it out, but it's like, that it doesn't always work that way. Or if you have shared FI, sometimes maybe having two FI is good if you both have the same FI, but you could have different FI from someone else's FI. It's just, it's too complicated to really narrow it down to type, in my opinion.
Yeah. There are trends though, like types
Of
that tend
course.
to date each other, types that tend to end up together. So
Yeah.
a common pairing I tend to see is like the extroverted and introverted versions of a type ending up together.
Yeah.
So an ENTJ dating an INTJ,
hmm
or an ENFJ with an INFJ, and vice versa.
Right. See, I think type has a lot to do with attraction, but not necessarily compatibility. I
Mm,
think you're attracted to certain types of people. Um, like, but it may not have too much to do with type. Like when I look back at my before being married, interest in people, it often was with extroverts. And most typology systems would say that's not how it should be, but it was, because I didn't want anyone to feel overwhelmed by me, So to me, it's like, even though there are patterns and trends, I think it goes beyond that personally, but I can see why there would be patterns and trends.
yeah, makes sense. And so is it the story or the actions or both that draw you into video games?
hmm
If you watch TV shows, what kind do you usually enjoy?
So for me, it's the story. I'm a big fan of like open world RPGs. So things like Skyrim, Oblivion, Morrowind, stuff like that have kind of big epic um, escapism kind of stories. Um, so for me, the story matters, the music matters. So kind of making sure that I feel something. Um, and then as far as what TV shows, I usually like historical drama kind of stuff. So things like Rome, or um, wow, why is it escaping me? There's lots of them, and it's escaping me because I'm on camera. Uh, but something like The Tudors or Game of Thrones, or like, I know Game of Thrones isn't historical, but yeah, I think the point's made there. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, that's also the difference between SE DOMs and any DOMs. SE gets to the point really quickly. Um, we were learning at Personality Hacker how to differentiate SE and NE, and they say that like when you ask SE a question, it will try to give you the conclusion really early on.
yeah,
So like if you ask it about its childhood, they'll go like, "I was a good child," because they want to get to the point. They're like,
right,
"Okay, that was the point of my story." Whereas if you ask NE like a similar or same question, they'll go on like a super weavy tangent, almost with many ideas weaved into it too.
right.
So it's not as directed to the point as SE would.
And I was talking to a friend about that, a friend in typology, and they were saying the kind of books they like to read. And this is someone who favors NE over SE. They don't like it when an author gets to the point at the beginning. They like more of the story being woven in and kind of the stage being set. And I like a journalistic style, almost nonfiction, like, tell me why I should care, and then we'll go from there. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
so,
SE is very much the headline of papers, like the hook, line,
mhm.
and sinker. It wants to get to the point, sum it up really quick, and give you the best part almost of
Yeah.
those parts.
And I'd say especially paired with TE, it's like we really want that efficiency to happen.
Cool. And so how well do your ENTP daughter and ENFP wife get along?
Oh my gosh. So it's funny because my daughter and I are basically like best friends, which is funny because socionics would say that we're super ego, but it hasn't been that way. That's not the question. The question is with my wife. Well, they get along, but they are so similar in a lot of ways that they can kind of butt heads because their NE will drive each other crazy. Like, neither of them will directly answer anything when they're talking to each other. And so I have to sometimes step in and be like, you guys are butting heads because none of you are answering each other's questions, and so I have to play mediator a lot because none of them are willing to be direct. So, but then when they're having fun together, it is hilarious because the wackiest, craziest things get said, when they're together. So they have a lot of fun as long as there's no business that needs to happen.
Yeah. And so what function do you want to understand more?
Good question. Either TI or NI. NI, because I realize the importance that holds in developing as a human and getting better at cultivating my SE in a way that's productive rather than counterproductive. But TI, because I just simply don't get it. Like I want to get it. I want to understand how it works. I know that we all use all 8 functions, and I firmly believe that. And I almost just consider it 4 functions with, 2 attitudes each. But TI is just something I don't favor very often, because that requires really thinking deep and in a calculated kind of methodical way, and like really getting to understand something at its like deepest level, or just claiming that something's true or false. And I don't do that very often. I have a hard time understanding how anyone does do that they can think that they have enough information to say something is true or false. Like that's where I would like to understand how TI does that, or like how do they reconcile not having the full amount of data to make that determination.
Yeah, I use both those functions, so maybe I can illuminate a little bit for you. So with introverted intuition, this is not all INFJs, but this is just how I experience it. I liked it being put eternal consequences of all time. So when it's in the dominant position, for some NI DOMs, it can feel like, for SE DOMs, they don't think about the consequences enough. With NI DOMs, they think through the consequences to the very end of the very last consequence that it's going to leave. And so it's almost like for everything, you have the end in mind. It's like, how is this going to ripple globally, impact societally, impact on a larger scale? Right. And so everything leaves a domino effect. Everything leaves a ripple. And that, like, those patterns ripple across time, and you can feel almost consequences and implications before they happen. You can just kind of have a knowing about how future things are going to turn out. Right. And so NI can really, that's one of the ways it manifests. So that's a subtype of NI. I recognize that not everyone experiences it that way. With introverted thinking, one of the elements of it is logical congruency. So it's wanting like logic to be congruent with itself. So what will happen if someone tells me something that I didn't factor into my framework, what will happen is I'll need to factor it in, but now I have to change every node that was attached to that node. Right. So to stay logically consistent, I'm like, if I update my understanding here, then I also have to update my understanding on these areas, because that's also impacted by that piece of knowledge. Right. So it's like extremely thorough with. Right. Yeah. And I just, I'm constantly wanting to collect data. And so I feel like I'm collecting data faster than I'm able to sort it out. Like making the sorted out judgments on whether those things are true or false or not. I'm more interested in like, well, does this thing work or not? Rather than like fully grasping the true or false nature. I'm always impressed by people who use TI like that. It's pretty cool. It's exhausting. Yeah, sounds like it. There's this interesting conversation I was in talking about FI and TI and the parallels between them, because they're very similar in a lot of ways. And it's almost like there's a certain type of pain being outside of congruency or alignment with it, because they're identity functions. Right. So like, in the same way, like FI feels a pang and hit when things go against its conscience, or things go against its values, or what it feels. TI also feels a pain against things not making sense. Right. And they feel like this compulsion to kind of correct the things that don't make sense. Yeah, it was interesting on your interview with Tim, the INTP, when he answered that question about that, and he was like, yeah, he was saying he doesn't feel like TI and FI have that same guttural feeling, that same like physical response to their identity being challenged. Like it's a different kind of response. I thought that was really interesting, because I cannot imagine having my identity get hit and not feeling it in my gut. Like that's just something that I can't imagine not feeling that way. And I'd love to know how TI handles that. That's a good question. Yeah. With FI, it's really a guttural, visceral type of experience. It's almost like you feel experiences down to your bone marrow. Yeah. It's very embodied experience. So Katie asks, if you recall, when do you find yourself spacing out or daydreaming? Are you in a relaxed or stressed state? Great question.
I find myself, I am less likely to daydream and more likely to find myself just out of nowhere subconsciously. I just start doing something else and not even realize that I'm doing something else. So usually I'm stressed out when that starts, and then I become relaxed once I realize that's what's happened. So like I'll be stressed at work, and then all of a sudden I'll just be like, wow, I've been playing this game on my phone for 10 minutes. When did that happen? Like it's so it's less daydreamy and more just my SE shifts to something else. And so yeah, it's usually starts in a place of stress or boredom. And this could, by the way, this might not be ESFP. This might be my 7, Enneagram 7. So I just want to throw that disclaimer out there. But maybe it's just it's strong in me because it's a combo of both. But no, so I would say it's more of in a relaxed place ultimately.
Interesting. Are you ever outside of the present moment?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that as in definitely because I'm a human and we all do that. My preferred place is in the present moment, and I am almost always there. But I know Kristen uses this phrase that sometimes she just S's out, or just like SEs out. And I really relate to that because sometimes like if people are brainstorming a bunch of ideas, if like it's super any heavy, like if I hear my wife and daughter having their little any moments together, I'll just find that I just am like staring into a place in the floor, like it's just, and that's enough any for me, I'm done. So that definitely happens.
Yeah. This fascinates me, like, because I wonder how much an SE user can feel outside of the moment. In our profiler training, so I'm one of Personality Hackers profilers, and we have calibration calls on how to type people better. And so how to ask questions and how to see responses to figure out someone's type. And we're actually taught to spot SE dominance or auxiliaries by this phrase, I'm in my head. And they don't know why, but apparently, like when you profile an SE Dom or an SE auxiliary, they might actually use that phrase or saying to describe themselves. And like we don't know why, but that's a thing that's reoccurring. And so I wanted to workshop that, but I never knew where it came from. I don't understand it.
I think what happens for me, like if I'm in an NI inferior mode, or if just I've activated that, it's like instead of being in the active moment, I feel like I'm actually in a place where I'm trying to sort out something. I'm trying to figure out the meaning of something, and it requires so much energy to activate that part of my brain, and so I think that's what happens for a lot of SE DOMs is that you get in this place where you kind of are in your own head for a moment because you've been extroverting, and then it's like your cup overfloweth with sensory data, or someone's trying to use intuition on you in the moment. Oh my gosh, that sounded like it was predatory or aggressive. Someone is using any around you and you're like, I don't have the brain capacity right now to handle this. Like I haven't even sorted out my own feelings on it. I haven't even made judgments on this yet. I can't brainstorm if I don't have a conclusion because I hate speculating. So I like to know before I provide an opinion.
Interesting. What is your relationship with guessing, Brady?
I really don't like it. I'm so literal. Like it's if I don't feel confident with something, and this is maybe what people would call a TI polar, it's this, it's this idea of if I don't feel like I know the truth to something, I don't want to come to like an NI guess about it or any brainstorm about it. I want to ask more questions, more sensory questions like, well, what did this person do? Or, what would happen in reality? I ask those kinds of questions before I feel like I can speculate on a conclusion.
Interesting.
I drive my wife crazy with that, and I feel bad when it happens.
Interesting. And so what do you wish the typology community knew and understood more about your type or high SE users in general?
So I'll start with also great question. I'll start with the ESFP part. There's this feeling that people get in the community that ESFPs like to get involved in gossip and social media and stuff like that. And I found that actually to be really untrue for a lot of the ESFPs I know, and also just cognitively it doesn't make sense. Mainly because we don't have like a high extroverted judging function. Like that's not necessarily something we're super concerned about. So I mean, I'm sure there's examples of people that you all know where the ESFP is maybe a little gossipy, but I personally don't relate to that stereotype. Like with the Frank James videos, like the obsession with Instagram on a lot of his skits with ESFPs, I don't relate to it. As much as I love his channel, by the way, I really like Frank James, but his ESFP portrayals kind of hit more of what I would call like an unhealthy ESFJ rather than an ESFP. And I say unhealthy ESFJ, not just any ESFJ. But yeah, I don't know. I just I think ESFPs often get mislabeled for that. I also wish people understood that we use our thinking function actually quite a bit because it's in the same attitude alignment as our SE. So it's like our preferred state of being is that SETE is where we feel the most at ease and most happy is when we're out experiencing the world and just testing to see if things work. So that's what I would say there.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so do you enjoy being on camera?
Yes and no. I love it because it's I enjoy talking with people and I don't mind making a fool of myself. Like if I watch these videos again and I trip over my words, I just look at it and I'm like, yeah, everyone does that. So I don't dislike being on camera, but I'm also not, pardon the phrasing, I'm not an attention whore though. Like I'm not someone who sees myself on camera and is like, yeah, look at that guy, he's awesome. It's not like that. I just don't mind being on it. Like it doesn't affect me one way or the other. So yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, you can continue.
Oh no, I was just ultimately gonna say I don't feel strongly about it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I get a little nervous ahead of time because I'm like, am I gonna, I get a little bit of that imposter syndrome. Like, am I gonna accurately represent ESFPs when I'm on the panel? Is my face gonna turn bright red like it is right now? But ultimately, I don't mind it so much.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if that could possibly be like a lower down thinking function. I find like sometimes when I invite on feeler types, whether they're FI or FE, they'll say things like, "I don't think I'm like smart enough to be on this panel." And I'm like, no, you're smart enough. Stay on the panel.
Yeah, right. I think that is something that we're insecure about, for sure. I think a lot of ESFPs in the type community, once they're in the community, feel that way. Because, I mean, all you have to do is look around and look at ESFP memes, and that's enough to see how the community views ESFPs, which doesn't bother me too much. I just think it's ridiculous because it's obviously not considering outside factors or cognitive functions when they do that. But yeah, no, I think that's low T. I'd agree with that.
Interesting. So Rainy Day commenter asks, happiness or truth? Do you have a general preference or is it totally context dependent?
No, I definitely have a preference. I prefer happiness over truth any day. Now, truth matters. Like it is important. I do value it. I do value that things work and things do make sense. Like I'm not a fan of the concept of blind faith, personally, and I'm not going to get into too much about that, but I want things to actually be practical and real. But I will always prioritize happiness ahead of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially happiness amongst other people. Like I really feel no urging whatsoever to try to change someone's mind on something. If they believe something, cool. If they're happy with it, that's fine by me. I don't feel a need to correct them unless it's negatively impacting someone else. and their happiness than I care.
What would you define as happiness?
Um, that's a really good question. It seems like such a basic one. I would say for me, it's like if I'm happy, it's where I'm able to do what I enjoy doing or what I naturally can do well. Um, and a lack of conflict. Again, that's probably my Enneagram 7 speaking. Um, but I really don't like people being in conflict and drama with one another. So for me, happiness is like and this is, I mean, it sounds super FE, but it's just like, I really enjoy people being in harmony with one another and enjoying each other's company, and people doing things that benefit others rather than benefiting themselves.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't sound FE. So Carl Jung actually uses the word, I think, harmony to describe both FE and FI.
Okay.
And so, yeah, here's a definition of harmony I have here. Feeling imparts values to things, people, ideals, or information, with the aim of building harmony, good feeling in the inner and outer world. So it's both FE and FI are
Right.
harmony based.
Okay.
Extroverted feeling builds harmony and rapport with people and things. Introverted feeling gives importance to ideas, information, and beliefs. Builds harmony and rapport with ideas. So they both actually deal with harmony and
Mm-hmm.
wanting people to be emotionally feeling good together,
Right.
but they reach at it in different ways almost.
Yeah. And for me, a lot of it is in the moment. It's about each individual. Like if something's going on, let's say between like my parents and my brother, like if they're having some tension, I remember as a kid, I would try to do anything to stop that, because I would see each one of them having something that was bothering them, and I could see that they weren't listening to one another. And so I would step in, and try to either entertain them or, do whatever it took to get it to stop. Usually in hey, let's go play this game, or let's go do this thing, or maybe you guys aren't thinking about this action that you did that impacted them. How would they have felt? And so that's kind of more of like how I approach harmony. So maybe that is more FI. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an inner conviction. And so this is an important question for ESFP. Is romantic love a feeling, situation, or a verb?
Well, first off, I'm not the most romantic person. So I might be the wrong ESFP to talk to about that. Because I'm much more along the lines of I want to have fun with my partner. It's almost like a really strong friendship. Of course, romance has its place. So I would say it's more of a situation then. Yeah. But I think that like, for me, I feel quote unquote romantic when my wife and I are together and we're laughing and like making fun of each other in like a kind-hearted way and bantering. Like that to me is when I feel the soul connection. So yeah. So
Yeah,
I would say situation. Yeah, it's situational. Yeah.
soul connection. Love the
Yeah.
sound of that.
Which is to me it's a situational moment. So yeah.
Mhm.
For me, I wouldn't consider it a verb. I don't like to think that I'm romancing her at any point. Like I don't really do that too much. So
Hello, do you cultivate your lesser senses like smell or touch? Is it important for you to have an accurate vocabulary for sensory data? Thank you.
okay, so I do not consider touch to be a lesser sense personally. Smell I do. Um, but yeah, no, I think what's being said there, if I was to guess, is that kind of like hearing and sight are kind of like the two big senses I think that people think about, but I might be wrong there. Yeah, so I cultivate all of it. Like it's all important to me, and I know that's very stereotypical SE, but It all matters. Like let's say I'm at the beach and I'm swimming, I actually like the taste of salt water. I don't mind if I crash and like sand or salt water gets in my mouth. It's actually like, in a weird way, it's almost kind of pleasant because it's like, the beach just owned me. That was fun. Like it's kind of like a reminder that I'm experiencing life. So accurate vocabulary, that's not important to me.
Mm.
What's important to me is that I experience them.
Mm-hmm.
But no accuracy for that. It's like, I don't think I could ever really fully describe to someone what my SEFI is experiencing. I could try,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think, it doesn't matter how accurate I am. I don't think anyone's ever going to really know what it feels like to be who I am as an individual. But I think the more accurate I can be about it, the more they can get close to understanding it. So I don't want to be like wrong, but I don't feel a need to be precise.
Mm. So what's the most out of character thing you did?
So being married to someone with inferior SI, I have had to do things like the bills in the household and arrange all the logistics for like who gets on the bus, who gets picked up where, those kinds of things. That is so out of character for me. I'm awful at it. But my wife is worse. She has things that she does that I'm terrible at. So that's by no means me criticizing her. It's just like we have our strengths, but it just so happens that neither of us are good at SI. So it's I've had to do so many SI related things, and so I would say that's probably the most out of character for me, is having to be a responsible adult.
Yeah. As we get older, we all have to develop SI, whether or not we like it.
Yeah. And that's probably, because the thing is, as an ESFP, we don't have a whole lot of out of characterness. We don't have a whole lot of filters, so it's funny because I hear that question being asked. And I think for introverts, especially, it's like, like Tim, for example, on his panel that he did with you when he mentioned traveling in Vietnam, I was like, yeah, I'd do that. Like that wouldn't be out of character for me doing something like that. I've done all sorts of crazy things. So for me, it's definitely more like having to actually settle down and be responsible has been out of character.
Yeah. I wonder, how natural is it for you to commit to things? Like,
It's not,
mhm.
but I'll do it because I value the people that I care about. So it's not natural for me, for instance, to work at home, but I have to do it. Like it's not natural for me to not want to do like 3 or 4 different activities in a day on the weekends, but I do it because my kids would go crazy if we were constantly on the go. They need to come home and have like a place to play and just be kids,
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. That's why the NI is also in the aspirational spot for ESFPs, because it requires commitment to think that far ahead into the future. Because you have to commit to all these chain of events,
Right.
and SC is like, anything could
Yeah.
happen.
Right. Anything could happen, right? And it is, again, stereotypical, but that's how I look at it. It's like
Mhm.
you can't plan on something going perfectly because who knows who's going to throw a wrench into it or what's going to throw a wrench into it.
Yeah, and you're confident with your ability to adapt and improvise in the moment too, so you don't really need to plan.
Yeah. Well, and if you do 5-year plans, what's going to happen in that 5 years? Like I had all sorts of plans for what I wanted to do with sports and everything, but then I got, a system-wide arthritis issue that kind of threw my plans off. So like I needed to be able to adapt to that and to find other ways to enjoy life. And that's something I think SE DOMs do really well. Like I think we get those moments thrown at us and we can kind of deflect it and just find something else. And of course that then we have our moments where we crash. Yeah, because you can't sweep things under the rug for too long.
Yeah. And so Crisis Alert asks your views on spirituality.
As much as I want to answer every single question,
You can pass if you want.
Yeah, as much as I want to, because I really don't actually like passing on questions, because I think that's a really good question. I think what I could do to sum it up is just say, I have a hard time with not having enough data to prove if something's real or not. So I think that would be enough of an answer for right now.
Gotcha. And so, as someone who prioritizes happiness, what do you think about Jung's individuation process if you encountered the concept in your type journey?
Can you, Joyce, do you know what the individuation process is? Because maybe if I had an explanation, I'd say whether I've read it or not, because maybe I just don't have a title for it.
Yeah, it's the journey of one-sidedness. Objective personality talks a lot about like the hero's journey. It's kind of like that.
Okay, that, yeah. All right. So it's that idea that eventually you almost kind of need to flip upside down. Is that kind of, yeah. So yes, yeah, absolutely. COVID did that to me. Because I was forced to be in a position where I couldn't SE the way I wanted to. And I was forced to be like, dude, what do you actually want to do with your life? You know, it was a midlife crisis of sorts, honestly. And it was very much like, okay, so you're not able to SE the way you want. You have this arthritis thing. You're bored. You're trapped in your house. Everyone's able to leave the house except you. You know, like, what are you going to do about this? And is being in a place of misery and self-pity acceptable? You know, like it's, so that's kind of like what I went through. And I feel like I went through some pretty heavy NI moments of like really taking in everything and being like, no, this is actually what I want to do with my life. You know, I won't get into the specifics of that, but basically I would say that the journey has been such that I really have had to use my lower functions a lot lately.
Yeah, you're in a very interesting position where you're an SE Dom whose medical condition prevents you from SEing in certain moments.
Right.
And so I wonder how life would be like with all the different types, and if they were in a circumstance where they couldn't use their first function, what would happen? This is almost like a thought experiment, but real.
Mm-hmm. So what I would say about that is I'm not able to do my favorite SE things, but I'm still able to do SE things.
Yeah.
So even though I may not be able to do my preferred things, like playing basketball is kind of out of the question for me with my condition. I just get hurt every time I try. And I just feel like a shell of myself physically, like, you know, ability wise, because I was an athlete in high school and college. So it's hard to put myself in a position where I'm not doing it at the same level, but I'm still able to do SE. I just have to shift. I have to shift expectations, and that's hard. Just like I think it would be hard for, let's say, an any user who was suffering from dementia, or, you know, like their mind was not working the way that they need it to work. Like, I'd imagine that's very similar. It's like, yeah, you still have access to your mind, but it's not optimal.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And so have you ever met another ESFP and questioned whether you were an ESFP as a result?
Yes.
Interesting.
So when we do the panels, I remember the first few panels that I did, I noticed that some of the people on the panels were a lot more chatty with lots more expression than I am. You know, like as far as ESFPs go, I think I'm a little bit more even toned than some that I know. And so seeing how expressive some could be, I'm like, am I really, you know, am I like an ESTP or something? And I realize I'm clearly not. But that did give me pause for sure.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you think culture or where you grew up in amplifies or dulls your natural inclinations being an ESFP?
100%. So I grew up, my parents are ISFJ and ENTJ. So I think I'm a lot more responsibility driven than a lot of ESFPs might be. Although it may not be in my nature to be, I've learned that I have to be, because I'd get trouble if I didn't. Like my parents are wonderful people, but they're just so much more inclined to care about to-do lists and societal view. They have TE and FE respectively ahead of their introverted judging functions. So, they're much more concerned about what the tribe or the group thinks or what they do than I am. So I think I've just always been a little bit more concerned about that than maybe some other ESFPs. Yeah, I think it makes a huge difference.
Interesting. I watched one of your previous ESFP videos Joyce has done, and I remember you saying you go into negative FI and I loops. I was wondering, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so just in general, as far as typology is concerned, your first and third functions are more optimistic. So what I mean by that is like whatever your first and third functions are, that's where you want to be. That's your preferred state. So your third function is in the same attitude orientation. So it's supporting whatever your first function's wanting to do, kind of feeds into it. Or like your second and fourth are almost like, they're more like background process that is kind of challenging that your first and third functions. So I go through these loops of my FI and I, my second and fourth, where I get a little bit more cynical. So whenever I have to think about what I value or think about my future, I sometimes get in a position where it's like really negative. It's the sleep state, if you will, for objective personality terminology. Thinking about myself and how it relates to the future usually doesn't lead to positive conclusions for me. It's usually like, you're not good enough, you're not organized enough. I'll say to myself, like, you set yourself these plans, you didn't do them. Like those are the kind of loops I go through that are negative. Whereas my happy place is just going out and experiencing the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting. So sometimes ESFPs will really avoid the FI/NI, and you'll see this sometimes in therapy. They'll kind of be happy during their therapy sessions, and then the therapist is like, okay, you have to stop putting on this optimistic front.
Yeah. Right. So I always say, like, my glass is not half full. My glass is 3/4 full. But the problem with that is that I'm ignoring that at one point it will empty, and then when it does empty, I'm like, what? And then that's where I start beating myself up. That FI/NI, like, you're not good enough. You didn't consider this. Like, you tell other people to care after themselves and you can't even care after your own self. Like, what are you doing? So that's kind of the place I get into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. So Mark asks, do you tend not to consider the consequences of things you say or do because they're spontaneous and not pre-thought out? Did it affect your relationships?
It's funny because I would say that socially, not so much. I do consider the consequences of what I say or do. Physically, not so much. So physically, this is where I don't consider the consequences. So because I value other people, so I rarely am putting other people in a position where they're hurt by my actions, or at least that's what I think. I could be wrong there, but yeah. I tend to be very considerate of other people's feelings. If someone has like a religious or political affiliation that I disagree with, I don't bring it up, just because I impulsively thought of it. Like, that's not really what I would do. But physically, oh my goodness, like the amount of times I hurt myself trying to make other people laugh. Like, I had a roommate in college who, there's this wall that was like maybe 4 or 5 feet off the ground, and he would walk on it, and it was like very narrow. And so I was teasing him about it. I'm like, hey, look, everyone, I'm Ray. Look at me. And I went sprinting down the wall, and I looked back and I fell, and my whole leg scraped on the wall, just because I thought it would be funny to to like just tease my friend about it. And so, you know, here I was, like this bloody leg. I still have a scar from it and everything. It's like, that's the kind of stupid stuff an ESFP will do. You know, like do belly flops off the diving board to get a laugh, because what would happen if I did that? You know, like that kind of stuff. That's where I don't think like, oh, if I do this, it's really going to hurt. So that's kind of more how I'd answer that question. It's more the physical stupidity rather than the social stupidity.
Yeah. And that physical stupidity, it goes down over age. So
Yes.
sometimes as you become older, one, your body doesn't work the way it used to. So you can always be as impulsive, but also
Right.
you become more like chilled too.
Yeah. I still have my moments where I go, like when I'm on the playground with my kids, like I'll hang upside down on bars or whatever and kind of forget that I have arthritis. And then the next day I'm just like, oh my God, what have I done? You know, and I'll be like limping around like an old man. So like in the moment, I kind of forget that I can't act like a kid anymore without paying for it. So I still have a little bit of that.
Yeah, so how the polarity of SE and NI work in an ESFP is that they're so in the moment that when you're in the moment, going from moment to moment to moment, you don't realize the long-term implication of doing the certain things you might be doing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so how natural is it to be yourself in social situations?
Always. So this is something I've explained to people about what FI auxiliary is like. I just am always myself. It's important to me that I'm always who I am, no matter where I'm at. So, and maybe having SE as my Dom helps there, but I find no problem being myself. I've met celebrities before and was not nervous. You know, it's being on the panels. The only thing I'm nervous about is just making sure that I, you know, represent the typology correctly. But I'm not worried about like, do people think Brady is funny? Do people think Brady's nice? I'm not worried about that stuff so much. Like I'm like, I'm just going to present myself how I always do. And if hopefully people like that, but I don't think too hard about it.
That's really healthy. Everyone could learn something from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the number one dating tip to anyone too. It's like, be yourself. If you want to find someone for life, they got to be okay with who you are anyway. But
Yeah. Avoid all the alpha male kind of advice. That's what we throw that out there. Yeah.
Be FI. Stay true to yourself.
Yeah. Stay true to who you are. Yeah.
What's real?
Concrete things I can touch and see. But no, if I'm going to be, that's such a stereotypical answer. But I think that things that I have experienced, things that I can interact with, concepts that are backed by evidence, to me, that's real. So if you can have evidence to prove something's true, I will view it as real. But then my mind can be changed, and something that I thought was real can all of a sudden be like, well, I was wrong there. That wasn't real. You know, I'm willing to admit that. But that would be my answer to what's real. Yeah. It's so much more complicated than that. And I know I'm not serving that question its full justice. But that's my take on it.
Mm-hmm. Another way of defining sensing is proof. It's like, all right, you have this guess, but what is your proof? Right. So another way of putting intuition is a guess, and another way of putting sensing is proof, and that's how you can contrast them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's really amazing how tuned into reality you are. When I talk to intuitive types, they act like reality is an option. It's like, oh, reality is an option I can engage with. Whereas like sensing is like, no, reality is a thing, like it's real.
Yeah. Right. And but I understand, you know, and in a way I'm pretty envious of people's ability to plug out of the sensing world. I wouldn't mind that sometimes.
Yeah. What do you think about sleep? Do you value it? Do you sleep a lot or do you sleep very little?
No, I actually have really poor sleep habits. I don't know if you've ever heard the term revenge bedtime procrastination, but it's the concept that you haven't done what you wanted, enough of what you've wanted during the day. So at night, instead of going to bed, you will do those things that you want to do. And that is something that I very much am guilty of. So, you know, I have a full-time job. I have 2 kids who are 8 and 4. You know, I'm married, so I have like these relationships that I really enjoy doing the things with them, but I'm hardly in a position to be able to do everything that I want to do. You know, like that would be irresponsible. And so at times I'm left at the end of the day thinking I didn't get enough of what I needed to do. And I value getting those things fed rather than sleep. So sleep for me is, it's a little bit optional, and I know it shouldn't be because it's not good for my health to not get enough sleep. And I'd probably be more likely to accomplish some of those things during the day if I did get more sleep. But I'm short-sighted, so I often don't get enough of it.
Interesting. And so Museum Girl asks, do you have any advice for types with SE polar?
Okay, so I think I know who this person is. I have a guess. That's my friend Amy. So hi, Amy, if that's you. So SE polar. Okay, so SE polar, I can't get you to physically go out and do something if you're not comfortable with it. So, you know, I think that the best thing to do is to stand your ground and only do things that you want to do. But to make sure that you do experience reality as well. So put your ideas into actions, the things that you care about, the things that you value, and the things that you want to accomplish, make sure you do them. That's what I would say. But I think it's really harmful to people who are, let's say, INFP or INTP to be like, nope, get up. We're doing this thing now. You know, come on, do it. I think that's really harmful for people who don't want to be forced to do something.
Yeah. Sometimes getting things into action is almost like when you're thinking about it, actually like do it in the moment. There's something called the 5-second rule by Mel Robbins. I'm pretty sure she's an SE Dom, and she talks about how if you want to do something, count down from 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's like, don't delay action, because delaying action was what causes inaction.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe advice for SE polar is the 5-second rule.
I would say, and if you have, let's say, FI, you know, if you're an INFP and you have that SE polar, it's like if you don't do it, then if you don't actually put it into action, then like how are you living out your FI? You know, like what do you have to show for your FI? Would be a way that I could say that. You know, so like if you delay it, then it's like, do you just have a lot of ideas but you don't want to act on it? Are you afraid to act on it? Like, why does it matter to you if you don't act on it, if you're not able to act on it? Like, how can it be important to you if you don't do it? So my brother's an INFP, and that's kind of a struggle I've had with him. It's like, dude, you like this thing. Why aren't you doing something with it? So I try to not be impatient, but.
Yeah. Sometimes when you have SI and it's like in that middle spot, like the third position, it can cause you to want to research things before you like do them. But like research it to all like you keep going and going and going into it, but not doing it because you're like looking at to the tiny details to see if you want to do it. But it's almost like if you just push yourself out there, like if you walk the plank and you wait, that sounds like you're gonna die.
That does not help SE polar.
If you walk the diving board, sometimes you just got to jump off. Yeah, because oftentimes I see INFPs or INTPs overthinking. So they'll kind of be in a thinking cycle. So the best way to end that is to either figure out if there's a fear behind that. So are you afraid of something, which is why you're overthinking?
Yeah, definitely. And the way I look at it is if you really care about something and you don't do it, then you're missing out on the things you care about. That's my tough love stance on it.
Katie asks, having SE seems to give the individual an appearance of fearlessness. Do you have fears and act in spite of them?
Absolutely. So I remember doing like a cliff jumping kind of thing when I was in high school. And I remember looking down at the water and my stomach turned inside out, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? It was like 40, 50 feet up, which is not like the most extreme jump, but it's up there. Like that's pretty high up there. And so I just kind of closed my eyes, took a deep breath, took a few steps back, and I just went for it because I was like, I'll regret it later if I don't do it. And that's kind of how I look at it. It's like I'm aware of my inferior Ni, and in the moment I'm like, yeah, if I don't do this, I'm going to beat myself up later if I don't, because I want to know what this is like. I want to experience this. I want to see what happens if I do it. So I tend to just go for things because how can I prove whether it was right or wrong if I didn't try it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's curiosity because your SE wants to experience, and there's also a fear of missing out because it's like, if I just miss out on this, then I'm just never going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also fear is a very interesting emotion because it's equivalent to anticipation. So you can switch between fear and anticipation really easily in your head.
Yeah.
You can actually be really happy, like butterflies in your stomach anticipation, or like a happy type of anticipation.
Right.
Energizing one. And it's very easy to switch to fear. So being scared and being in action. So a lot of people sometimes like they talk about how if you want to become more fearless, you see your fear as actually anticipation. You kind of like rewire your brain to see it like that.
Right. Absolutely. Because that's sometimes you hear the phrase like someone's fearful of success. And really what it is, they're feeling that anticipation and they're confusing it with something. Maybe it's like, oh, maybe I don't want this. It's like, no, you do want it. You're just like, what if it doesn't go well? Of course it's going to pop up. But sometimes you just really want the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fear is an emotional signal that there's risk involved.
Mm-hmm.
So it can either be a good risk, you can frame it like that, or a bad risk involved. And that's where it is. Do you have a favorite book?
Oof. No, but I do have some books that I've enjoyed over time. I think a good ESFP book, just in general, The Great Gatsby is a good book for that. Just kind of the lifestyle of that book. I like that one. I really liked, I liked the Lord of the Rings series, although it's a bit dry. I'm reading right now. We're reading Harry Potter to my daughter, and I'm really enjoying that. It's fun. But no, I'm not much of a reader, and I'm sorry to the ESFPs out there who I'm harming by perpetuating a stereotype. But it's I'm just not much of a reader.
Mm-hmm. What's SE heaven?
The beach. Absolutely. I love the beach. It's I love the sound, the smells. I love all the different animals and stuff to discover. I like being like in Hawaii. I like going under the waves, with the snorkel and checking out all the different things that are down there. I like the sensation of being tossed by a wave. I like the feeling of the sand between my toes. I like the warmth. To me, at the beach, SE heaven, absolutely. Never run out of things to do at the beach.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, I love it.
How about theme parks like Disneyland?
I love theme park. Disneyland. I grew up in Anaheim, which is where Disneyland is. So as a kid, I got to go quite a bit. And I really enjoy roller coasters. Sometimes they make my stomach a little queasy if they hang you upside down or do the rock back and forth too much. So I'm not a big fan of that, but I love the thrill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love just the atmosphere of Disneyland. You've got the music and the characters and it's just a fun place to be.
Mm-hmm. Is there any way to get a sense of thrill from being indoors in your home?
Yeah. So like my daughter and I like to play dodgeball with each other. Like we just, we have a fun game, and she likes to make up different rules each time. And usually she likes to make up rules so it screws me over, which is hilarious. And but I kind of like playing the underdog in that situation. And then, of course, because I'm a nice dad, I let her win sometimes. But yeah, no, I absolutely love doing stuff like that, making up games and being silly with them. And my son and I like it when he jumps on me and, you know, just like horseplay. Love that kind of stuff.
Jason says there's a song with the lyrics "Won't pass up on danger. I'd miss out on the fun. Won't miss out on the fun." Would you say that's a good ESFP
Yes.
motto?
Also, hi Jason, and
Hi, Jason.
everyone watch my ISFP journey by Jason. It's an amazing YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an amazing quote. I really like that. Because to me, that's how I experience life. How do I know whether something's real or true or not if I don't try it?
It's almost like the challenge is exhilarating in itself.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And, you know, I kind of need to know where I stand on things. And since I don't like to speculate, I have to actually do them to know.
Makes sense. And so in your interaction with other people, do you ever feel something missing? Fun, intellectual, sense of humor? Also, it could be something recurrent or individual based.
Yes, definitely. I mean, we're human. So I think that no matter who you interact with, there's something that's being hidden, something that someone's not sharing, something that you're not sharing yourself with those other people. So I think with each individual, it looks different. You know, like I think a lot of times with like when I hang out with guys, there's a lot of that emotion is missing, you know, because there's a lot of repressed emotions when you're hanging out with other men, which I really dislike. I like being an open book and sharing that kind of stuff, and a lot of guys just don't. And that can be frustrating for me. So I find that I actually enjoy the company of women a lot more because of that. There's more, and this is so stereotypical, I know, but it's an overgeneralization. But just in general, I found that that's to be the case. And maybe it's just I feel more comfortable talking emotions and feelings with people who are more open to it. But yeah, no, it's definitely there, and it's recurrent. I don't feel like people show their true selves very often.
Yeah. And that's a story I hear a lot from feeler men, that when they hang around other guys, they don't feel like they can be as emotionally open.
Right.
So sometimes they have female friends because they are able to talk more emotionally with them.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's, to me, I think that's a cultural thing rather than a genetic one personally. But I mean, I'm sure there's some genetics tied into that. But I think culturally, I think guys are told to suppress that kind of stuff. And to me, that's a shame.
It is a shame. So do you have a sense of a hierarchy of your senses? 1 to 5, what is your most used senses and what is your least used senses? 1 being the most used.
So for me, I think that vision is my first. So I think this is actually probably true for a lot of SE, because we're always scanning. You know, it's like always scanning the room and picking things out. So I would feel weird without that sense of depth perception and without that peripheral vision of knowing what's going on around me. I'd feel really empty without that. So to me, that's probably my number 1 is vision. And then after that, I'm very kinesthetic. So I'd say that's my number 2 is touch. And then I have terrible hearing. So that's probably my last one because I hate it. And then, yeah, so smell and hearing is towards the back. Taste is in the middle. I have a love-hate with taste. I wish I didn't like food so much.
Yeah. What type of foods do you like?
Spicy. So I'm the person who, if you go to a restaurant and it's 5 stars, I'll ask for 6 because they often underdo it. So,
Ooh.
yeah.
You're the one who searches for the ghost pepper within every restaurant.
Yeah. So I'm the one who likes going to the authentic restaurants because they don't Americanize it so much. So you're more likely to get the good spices and flavors if you go to the hole in the wall places.
That's a good tip for people who like spicy food. And so we're going to take a few more questions and then we're going to close down the panel. Mark asks, what would you say is the core difference between you and your ENFP partner?
Ideas versus concrete. So, you know, we're both very fun-loving, passionate people. but the core difference being that things for me need to be concrete and tangible, and she's really big on the intangibles, and it makes for a good combination when we're on the same page. Like we have a fun house. Our kids are never lacking for entertainment and things to do, but sometimes there is that conflict of like, I want things to be a little bit more funneled down and narrow, and she wants things to be much more chaotic and open. And so there is a little bit of that conflict. So I kind of sometimes I almost have to play the role of the judger, in the relationship because of that, which I don't particularly enjoy when that happens, but yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you feel is your most flow state? When are you in flow?
Yeah, I have a few answers for this. So one is playing basketball. When I was a kid, that was my obsession. I just love playing basketball. I just like the whole world around me disappears. I'm just in that moment and I love it, because it taps into so many sensory things. And it really feeds my FI. And nostalgia. And then the beach being the other one, which I alluded to earlier.
Excellent. So sports is in your answer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love sports. I love physical activity. Anything where like my body is directly interacting with the world in a really meaningful and strong way.
Yeah. Being able to use your senses to its fullest.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome. You'd really like VR? Is that virtual reality where you put on the goggles? Or
No,
goggles?
I actually don't. I was going to say, I actually really don't like that because it's a warped version of reality. It really throws me off. Yeah. Really throws me off. I actually don't like that too much.
Creepy.
Yeah.
Almost. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
What other things are kind of like warped versions of reality that you don't like?
So let's see. Why am I not thinking of? There's like a really big example. I know this sounds crazy coming from an ESFP, but social media. I don't like social media because I feel like people are presenting a very narrow view of who they are. And people buy into it. And it's like this really, to me, it's just very inauthentic. Some people use it authentically, and to those people, kudos. But I know just in general, it's a pretty negative, warped reality for me that I don't like. It makes me feel uneasy.
Yeah. It's not good for mental health for some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Limiting the screen time is pretty good for health.
And I know there's another answer to something that feels warped that I don't like, and I'm not able to think about it at the moment, but virtual reality definitely up there.
In your opinion, as an ESFP, how would someone, spouse, friends, coworkers show you respect?
I want freedom of choice. So respect would be asking me what I want, what I would like to do as well, because I'm going to grant that to the other person. Offer options. So if you have an ESFP in your life, which crisis alert, I believe that you do, it's very important, I think, to be like, okay, what do you want to do? What are your thoughts? What would you like to do with your time? And give them options to be out to adventure on their own. I think that's something that people don't realize with ESFPs is they think, oh, they're the partier. That means they need to be around people all the time. That's not true. The extroverted function that makes us extroverts is sensing. It's not feeling. It's not thinking. We don't need people to extrovert. Although it's nice. It's nice to have others around. But giving space to let them do what they want to do at some point during the day is huge.
Yes, the good old freedom.
Yeah. And that's why COVID killed me so much, because it was like I had, with lockdowns and all that, at no point in the day did I have autonomy over my decisions. And that was brutal.
Ooh, that's true. So are you, in a manner of speaking, anti-tech, maybe limit it as much as possible?
Yes and no. So I've been saying for a really long time that I think the internet is like, it might cause societal regression. I remember saying that very early on, because my concern was that people would use it to like bullhorn their ideas, and to kind of force people into listening to, like, basically the squeakiest wheel gets the grease. It's kind of the idea that people can just be loud. They don't need to have any evidence or proof of what they're saying. They can just go based off of kind of bullying. And I'm seeing that happen quite a bit with social media and technology. But it's so cool to be able to do things like this. It's cool to be able to play video games. It's cool to be able to watch live sports on TV. So I'd be lying if I said I'm anti-tech. I'm just worried about people forcing their opinions on others and it being used negatively.
Yeah, it's good when it fosters connection.
Mm-hmm.
So you're able to connect like we are right now. It's
Right.
worse if it creates excuses for a lack of connection. So
right, yeah.
It's almost like, when you're at a dinner and then someone's on their phone and then you're out, you see someone when they could be connecting, they're really just separately checking phones.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's something.
Mm-hmm.
Ice Candy asks, do you have tips for how to be confident in social situations?
Yeah, just remember that the other person is just as self-conscious probably, or just has as much reason to be self-conscious as you do. Whether that helps you or not, I don't know. But ultimately, that's my tips on it. When I meet people, whether it's it doesn't matter who they are, they have feelings, they have preferences, they have their own securities and insecurities too. And so I find no need to be intimidated by somebody because of that. Like, I value who someone is, not what someone might represent. So I remember meeting John Stockton, who is Hall of Fame point guard. He was, anyways, big basketball legend. I met him in person and made fun of his shorts, and he thought it was funny because he used to wear these little tiny shorts. And I met him and just made a little joke about it. And it's like, I remember everyone looked around me like I was crazy. And I'm like, I bet people treat him like he's a god. It's probably nice for him to have someone kind of joking around with him instead. So
treating you like you're human.
Right. And that's how I view it. It's like, I feel like if you treat people like they're idols or like they're somehow more important than you, that's like, you're not doing them a favor. So, or yourself a favor.
It feels lonely to be on an idol. And sometimes you get kind of paranoid that someone's going to want to knock you down. Because if you're on an idol, people might want to bring you down too. But
yeah,
you're treated like you're human. It's nice. It's pleasant.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel like it's, so to give advice to people to not be awkward in social situations, it's just, everyone, you can either look at it as everyone's judging everyone else, or everyone actually wants to get along with you and they just want to know what you think.
Mm-hmm.
More than you realize.
Oh, that is adorable. That's awesome. Good for shy people. And so last question, have you ever had to, for life reasons, use your lower functions like TI and NE, so your shadow functions? If so, what is your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll use NE because I'm married to an NE Dom and I have a daughter who's an NE Dom, and my son has, NE child or tertiary. So I feel like I have to use it a lot to engage with them. So yeah, I'm not great at it, but I can do it. I can brainstorm ideas, and sure, deep down, it might just be NI that's trying hard to be NE, but I use that one actually quite a bit. TI is a lot harder for me because I don't really fully. I am so critical of the idea of something being truly, true or false, or me ever knowing enough to say if something's true or false. So critical of myself there on that. So I don't use it a lot, but there are moments in your life where you have to, whether you want to or not. Like, if you went totally based on feelings, your feelings on something all the time, that would end really poorly. Like, I need to know that there's certain things I can't do for factual reasons. Like right now I can't, even though I would love to, I know logically TI that I cannot play basketball because of my health conditions. And I have all sorts of reasons for that. TI reasons, like my joints will get hurt if I do these things because of these reasons. So whether that's TI or TE, I don't know. But yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And so last question, Brady, how do you handle Joyce's FE attacks?
They're not attacks. Praise me all you want. Bring it. I love it. Yeah.
All right.
No, I think it's great because Joyce makes people feel very wanted and appreciated on her videos. And I know that, sure, it feels great to hear these things, but also I know how important it is for her to present herself in that way. Like I know how much that matters to her soul, like why that matters for her to do that. Same with my mother-in-law is an FE Dom, and I know how much it's important to let her do her FE things, and if you try to get in the way of it, it's, or if you deny it, it's really harmful for them. So I love it. Makes her feel good and makes everyone else feel good.
Yay. Yeah. If you like words of affirmation, well, come on my panel.
Yeah, exactly.
I will affirm you.
Yeah.
Yeah. On that note, oops, I have bad sensory, so I click random clown.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh,
yeah, love bombs, exactly. I like
you.
that. That's good.
Thank you, Brady, for coming on and discussing your personality in such thorough detail and richness. When you eat a dish that is super rich, your commentary on your type is just like the richest of food dishes.
Ooh, I hope it's spicy.
Yeah, your humor is spicy and playful, like the spiciest of those hole-in-the-wall restaurants.
Yes. Excellent.
Yeah, it's really nice hearing the components of what comprise your ideal day, going to the beach and playing dodgeball. Next time I see you, I'm going to throw a dodgeball your way and see if you watched it.
Good luck. I'll own you. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, it'll be fun. Watch out.
Yeah. It's nice to see you own your SE and just kind of really make the most of the moment, capitalize on the moment, seize the opportunities like no tomorrow. And I love Avalanche. Oh, that's so cute.
Oh my gosh, adorable.
Her attack would be Avalanche. That's really cute. So yeah, Brady, thanks for being so fun-loving and goofy and taking a jab at me.
I love doing that. It's fun.
I think I'm really teasable. I've been told that it's really fun to mess with me because I give a lot of reaction.
Oh yeah, your giggles are adorable.
Oh no. Yeah, so thanks for this opportunity to get to know you more, and it's nice to be writing a book with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited,
everyone. Yeah, it's gonna be our theory and our take on typology, and it'll be coming up sometime.
Yeah,
a virtual hug.
Yeah.
Yay. Thanks everyone for the wonderful comments, and I'll see you all in the next episode.
Thank you, chat, for coming along.
Thanks for the wonderful questions.